You know, he'll live in our hearts forever. He'll rest in peace, we hope. Well, I have wandered far too long. My weary bones are heavy spent. Now won't you lay me down to rest? A pillow fit for a journey's end, where my own father plowed the ground, and he set a table poor but proud. Oh, with the house where I was born, you let my sleep be safe and warm. And in my heart so sadly sweet, the dream of home, the dream of home. It touches my soul, too soft to flee. When far on the sea or land I roam, through all my days in foreign lands, through all my dark and distant nights, pictures of you so close at hand, and thoughts of you fill my mind. And though my passage has been long and stayed, my first affections never fade. And though my course has been oft confused, my way has always led to you. And in my heart so sadly sweet, the dream of home, the dream of home. It touches my soul, too soft to fleet. When far o'er the sea or land I roam. Now when my story's all but told, let the final chapter tell of victories in lands of gold, and how the mighty villains fell. But if I could hope for just one thing, one final chorus I could sing, I'd lift a cup with all my friends, and I'd cheer we made it home again. And in my heart, so sadly sweet, the dream of home, the dream of home. It touches my soul, too soft to flee. When far on the sea or land I roam, it touches my soul, too soft to flee. When far on the sea or land I roam. Rest in peace, Gord Downie. But I used to love the bookmobile. It was a truck, like a blue truck, like a half-size school bus. That once, like every 2 weeks or something, would come to our school in Petty Harbour. And you could go out and, get a book. Like, you guys know how the library works, like. But, I always thought that was so cool, because we didn't have a library in our school even. And what I was told was a music section in the bookmobile. And I remember I got one of the first books I took out when I was like grade 6 or something, was like, How to Build Your Own Guitar. I did not build my own guitar, but it was cool. So I'm grateful to the library here for putting this on tonight and for having us all here. And once again, a round of applause for Scott and everybody at Penguin Random House for putting us all here. So the book is called A Newfoundlander in Canada, which people have found peculiar. Somebody on Twitter today said, "Are you trying to imply that Newfoundland is a different place?" And I was like, well, yes. It was. Very recently a different place than here. And the context in which the book begins is really, the easiest way I can kind of explain how I wanted to start talking about it was that if you take the 3 generations of Doyles that grew up in Petty Harbour, right? My number 1 would be my grandfather, number 2 my father, number 3 me, right? My grandfather was born in Petty Harbour in the 1920s, I believe. And by the time so he was born in a country called Newfoundland. And around 1949, a vote came to give up being Newfoundland and to join some other country. I can tell you exactly how my grandfather voted. Because he did tell me many times. And he was reported to say to me and my cousins occasionally, "So you're going up to Canada, are you?" Which I always found confusing. So fast forward about 20 years or so, and my father was born in Petty Harbour. Now he was born in the early 1940s. And in 1949, when he was like, 8, 9, 10 years old, whatever it was, the exact date, he went from being a Newfoundlander to a Canadian. So he was sort of had one foot in the old and one foot in the new. And then fast forward another 20 years or so, and I was born in Petty Harbour. And I was born in a country called Canada. So as I say in the book, in the most awkward and peculiar way, nobody in my family moved anywhere for the last 100 years or so. We're all born in the same place. There was no war that we fled, or no massive emigration or immigration happened. But I'm from a different country than them, and I'm a first-generation Canadian. It sounds so weird to say it out loud, but my mom and dad were not born in Canada. And I do believe that is the exact definition of a first-generation Canadian, because I was. And as I say, I was as a young fella kind of confused about what country I would belong to, because my parents didn't spend a lot of time talking about it because they got married early and had 4 youngsters that were, as starved to death as me, or as much trouble as me, or worse. And so they spent all their time trying to feed us, and I don't remember many headsy conversations in between, trying to fill the wood stove about what our particular national identity may or may not have been. And I can guarantee if I ever asked the people of my grandfather's generation, I knew what country they said I belonged to. And I thought I belonged to Canada, But I was confused about that too, because when I ever watched stuff on TV, I didn't sound like anybody from Canada. And when stuff came on from Ireland, I did sound like that. And the instruments that my mother and father played and the songs they played sounded more like the stuff from Ireland and England than it did from Canada. And my mom and dad, and certainly the people from my grandparents' generation, didn't know anything about Canada. They'd certainly never been there. And so I was curious about it, even as a very young age. And I remember I started this book, and one of the things that jogged my memory about it all was this map. And you'll see it if you got your own book, but it looks kind of like this. And if you look at your own, do you want to put up a bit of house light for? Do you mind doing that? Just up there. There you go. So if you want to look at your book, I feel like a teacher. This is so wicked. Oh, I can't wait for someone to speak up. Get to the principal's office. But you'll see the book and you'll see. So what it was I think it was grade 1, but it might have been grade 2 or something. I'm not totally sure. And the job given to me by the teacher was, they gave us just this generic outline of the map of Canada, right? And said, fill in everything you know about Canada on this map. Now, right away, you will notice that a lot of the stuff on the right-hand eastern side has a lot more information than... The amount of stuff I knew was completely disproportionate to the population around the country. And I won't go through all of it, but you'll just see, there's Newfoundland is over here and is divided equally exactly into 2 parts. Town, which is St. John's, and around the bay, which is everywhere else. Yeah, just Newfoundlanders in the audience, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I knew where Labrador was up here, but I knew there was a line somewhere that divided Quebec and Labrador. And I was confused about where it was, so I didn't put it in there. And then I knew what the Maritimes, because I knew where North Sydney was, and And I knew that Halifax was somewhere in that part. And then I knew there was another place in there that had the same name as St. John's, because our Christmas presents always went there by accident. That is true. I cursed the other St. John's for years. And then I knew there was Prince Edward Island, but I misspelled it and put P-I-E there. That's true. The rest of the thing was pretty quick to go through. I knew that the Montreal Canadiens, the greatest sports team in the history of the world, you should have seen when I said that in Toronto. I knew Montreal Canadiens played somewhere over here because, and I knew that Toronto was over here because on Hockey Night in Canada, they'd always put like a graphic on and they'd like have a fake airplane. And when it left Montreal, it had like the form or whatever. When it arrived in Toronto, it always had what looked like to me to be some kind of rocket. This big, tall, like spaceship. That what comes to learn later is the CN Tower. And I couldn't remember how to spell Toronto. So I wrote it the way it sounded like to me, the way everybody in Petty Harbour said it, which was C-H-R-O-N-T-O. 2 syllables, Toronto. I knew where Vancouver was, because I knew that was the city way out as far as you could go, I thought. And I knew that was in British Columbia. And I knew somewhere around there was mountains, but there was still a big pile of Canada left that I didn't know anything about at all. And I figured that, I heard the fishing on the wharf when the fish got bad, they would say, we might have to go out west to find work. So I assumed that part was out west. Everything from Toronto to Vancouver. And then there was still all this part up here. And I heard people also, when they were looking for work, saying, I heard they got oil now, we might have to go up north to work in the oil. So I assumed that was up north. This represents every single thing I knew about the country of Canada as a 7 or 8-year-old. And so, as I grew up, I got a bit, you can replay some of it if you want, that's fine. Unless you guys care, do you guys care? What are the rules? I don't know the rules. I feel like we're all having good. And so anyway, I started out kind of very curious about Canada, and I wanted to know more about it because of what I saw about it, I liked. You know, I saw, people playing hockey in Toronto, that looked cool. And I saw people playing hockey in Montreal, and that looked super cool. Because everybody got dressed up, and everybody smoked. Even on the bench, for God's sake. And then, Tommy Hunter came on just before the hockey, and that was awesome. I was like, sounds good. So, but of course, I never really thought much about ever getting there, because it just seemed so far away. I mean, it seemed like, just an impossibility for a fellow who really only did the St. John's 2 or 3 times, And so, and then of course, as luck would have it, I met Sean McCann and Bob Hallett, Darryl Power, in the first parts of 1993, and we started a band called Great Big Sea. I haven't read this part yet, so apparently. We made our way to the West Coast, our first trip to the West Coast of Newfoundland, and at this point, I was 23. And I had never, ever, because my family didn't make money, we didn't go on vacations or anything, and if we did, we went to someone's cabin or something like that. Like I'd still never, with the exception of a couple of hockey trips, like where you go like at 9 and you could sleep in the 1 bedroom, and get smashed and all that kind of stuff, or whatever. I had never really slept, I had never slept in a hotel bed by myself, ever. And I was 23, just turned 23. And I just want to read this because it's kind of curious for me. And we check into a hotel in Stephenville, Newfoundland, right? And I won't say, I hide the name of it here, but And if anyone's actually been to Stephen and know the hotel I'm talking about, let's not, I'm sure it's much nicer now. And, but I was just so fascinated with it. I read this just because I think it will illustrate, how fascinated I was with it all. Because we checked into this, what anyone would see these day and age is a very, very, very modest roadside motel. I stood there leaning on Sean's festiva, with my 2 feet in a pothole about 2 inches deep. Rainwater seeping into my sneakers as I surveyed the castle that was Black's Motel. I took a breath and studied the flashing "The Antsy" sign. The letters that did not work. The letters that did work flashed at irregular intervals, which, intentional or not, was a cool design feature. I was certainly not about to let a poorly attended light bulb ruin this for me. All I could see was the luxury of it. The narrow, scratched and dented doors were located conveniently right off the parking lot. We'd be able to load our stuff right in from the cars into the rooms after the gig. Brilliant. As I walked slowly into our room, I noticed the doors were also nice and thin. So you'd be able to hear everything that was going on in the parking lot and in the lounge across the way. The beds were definitely big enough for more than one person, but Sean and I had the place to ourselves. The sheets were almost see-through. Not like those thick flannel ones Mom gave me for our frat house to see. So I knew it wouldn't be too warm. The rotary dial phone was right between the 2 beds on a handy nightstand. I opened the drawer and was surprised to see a Bible. I picked it up and flung it open just to see which verse it would fall to, as if there would be an oracle or fortune cookie message hidden within it just for me. As the good book fell open, I noticed that many of the pages had been torn out, and torn out with purpose. Well used, I suppose, I said to Sean, who had the look of pleasant disbelief. I went to check out the bathroom and was stopped mid-stride when I noticed 2 sinks. One on the wall in the room itself and the other inside the bathroom with the toilet and the tub. Both had mirrors above them and had individually wrapped soaps in the soap holders. 2 sinks! 2 soaps, McCann! Esquire, wicked. 2 channels on the TV, too. Instead on the bed. And I said, yeah, deadly. And this toilet here has been, wait now. This toilet has been, I had to get down on my knees to read what was printed on the paper. This toilet has been, sanitized for our protection. Pretty upscale, I thought. And I'm going to read you one of those poor choices right now. This story comes from the Manitoba chapter, and the first song we really played in Winnipeg, Manitoba, we were driving. For some reason, I can't remember why. I guess we must have drove past to go to a gig in Saskatchewan or something. Yeah, and then because we had to double back. Or maybe we went to Vancouver first and then hit it on the way back or something. I can't remember, but we were coming from west to east, unusually. And I remember that because we got towards, we were in I don't know, somewhere in Manitoba. And the guy said, we shouldn't go on the road now, there's going to be a snowstorm. And the roads are going to shut down. We're like, what? We're from Newfoundland. turns out we didn't know anything about bad weather and a winter storm that happens. And by the time we got to Portage la Prairie, which is about, what is it, about 80 or 90 kilometers or 100 kilometers from Winnipeg maybe? It's supposed to be an hour or so anyway. It was like chaos, it was like Armageddon. There was cars everywhere, out in the ditches and over on the, on the meadows on our side of the highway. And anyway, we had been in this van now that we rented off some dude in Toronto a while back. And to make a long story short, I'll get to it, it wasn't in good shape by the time we were making our way back to Toronto. And we had, the one thing I can tell you about is that for some reason when we picked it up, there was some like law or something in Ontario at the time where you couldn't take the back seat out of a 16-passenger van because you'd be putting cargo in it then or something. So we had to take a seat out to fit our stuff in. So we took the seat out right behind the driver's seat. And they said, yeah, you can take that one out. And as I said earlier about poor decisions, we said, yeah, that'll be fine. So we took that one out and we laid all our guitars there, and I said, you know what we should do? We went to an Army Navy store and I bought an air mattress. And I blew it up, laid it on the top of the guitar cases, and this was going to be my bed. From Toronto to Victoria and back. And we weren't 2 days into it and the friggin' thing burst. But I'd already volunteered, so I sat there. And so this poor guy with a business suit on, like he'd put his rental car or whatever off the road, and was flagging someone down to save him in our van because we had a great driver. Tony was our first tech, and we were managing to keep this van on the road somehow. And so the partner had to pick him up. It was like, so this poor guy's like a fella crawling through the desert or something, and this oasis shows up. Anyway, he slides open the door. Waft of smoke. And as the smoke clears, you can see like 3 or 4 disheveled looking fellas on seats, dying to talk to him because we've been talking to each other for so long. And me sat on a deflated air mattress and surrounded for some reason by Cadbury Easter Creme Egg wrappers. He was right to be confused. I'll make sure I'm in the right spot. Oh no. Yeah. 1 second. Here it is. 1 second, it's going to be wicked. I'm going to skip it. He was right to be suspicious. The van looked like we'd stolen it some time ago and had been on the run ever since. About 3 weeks previous, we had played a gig at one of the early GBS haunts in Toronto. After the show, I had a few drinks with an old pal who'd recently scored a job as an Ontario region sales representative for the Cadbury Company. Dale asked if we'd like some snacks for the road, and I said sure, and I didn't think much more of it. We were all set to drive off the next morning when the hotel clerk knocked on the van window and asked if I was Mr. Doyle. I nodded, and she pointed to a cardboard box, roughly the size of a goalie's hockey bag, sitting in the lobby. That's for you. A delivery truck from Cadbury dropped it off early here this morning. It was too heavy to lift, so I pushed it across the lobby floor. I tipped it up into the side of the door of the van and dropped it on the air mattress, and we sped off. What's in it? What's in it? The boys asked before we were even at the parking lot. We were as excited as kids on Christmas morning. I busted the box open. Some Easter Creme Eggs. I kept digging and digging, expecting a variety pack of sorts. And some more Easter Creme Eggs. What else? Bob twisted around in the front passenger seat to see. It appears, gents, that my pal Dale at Cadbury has given us a box of boxes of Easter cream eggs. So, when the final tally was done, there were 12 boxes of 24 eggs. So 5 fellas in a rental van with a missing bench seat and a leaky air mattress spread over guitar cases left Toronto bound for a month-long tour to Victoria and back with almost 300 Easter cream eggs. Like many romances, my relationship with those eggs got off to a very promising start. I was enamored. I couldn't believe my luck. The perks of being in a band were finally rolling in. I had my first sample with the CN Tower still in plain sight in the rearview mirror. Sweet, salty chocolate with a tangy, creamy inside. Delicious. I had another one before we hit Hamilton about an hour later. I ate a third one late that night and after the gig in Guelph, I believe. As I settled into the hotel bed for a good night's sleep, I reflected on what I had put in my body that day. 3 large coffees, 3 small bottles of water, 3 cans of beer, 1 foot-long sub, and 3 Cadbury Easter cream eggs. The next day I ate 2 more. On day 3, I feared I would not eat any at all. But the drive from Sudbury to Sault Ste. Marie is a long one. And with hunger and boredom setting in, the egg started calling me, seducing me with its curves and sweetness. Just the tip, I said to the egg. And it nodded back to me, I'm sure. But the next thing I knew, there was another wrapper on the floor and the egg was gone. The slippery slope had tipped hard and I didn't even know I was on it. After a few days later, I hated myself every time I looked at the box. Every morning I swore, I will not be tempted by one of those sirens today. No friggin' way. I am better than that. But the drive from Thunder Bay to Winnipeg is a long one. It was like the Lord of the Rings, and the egg was the one ring to rule them all. I started as Frodo, but was quickly becoming Gollum. I may have even whispered, my precious, as I surrendered to the egg over and over again. And it's not all that serious. There's foolish stuff in there too. It's a song I wrote for Mom and Dad, really, and it sort of comes off a story from in the first book about when we used to run out of oil at our house, when we'd run out of money and stuff. And I think for most families, that would be kind of an embarrassing tragedy or something. But as I write in the first book, we often ran out of home heating fuel when Mom and Dad ran out of money, which of course was called for a great celebration. Because then we'd put blankets up to the kitchen, and that's when we'd sing songs, and and the kitchen would be warm from the stove, and then my uncles and they would find out that Tommy ran out of oil, so they'd all come over again, and we wouldn't have any oil, but we'd have a bottle of rum and 2 guitars. Who needs oil? And I don't know if I've ever sang it a cappella, though. Is it alright if I do it that way? Do you mind? I don't know if you had said no, I'm not sure what I could have done. That was a risky thing. Automatically make a piano player. But anyway, this is kind of I'll try to sing it as best I can, with unaccompanied as it goes. who would go around and sing. It was just a simple thing. She could play and he could sing, and when he offered her a ring, she offered him a smile. And with nothing to their names but a melody to play, they sang the cold away, and somehow all the while they're making something out of nothing. When the winter nights were long, but come what may, they found a way, somewhere in a song, somewhere in a song. And the tunes that they performed gave them shelter from the storm, and the waltzes kept them warm when the drums were all but dry, and the harmonies grew strong when the children came along. And then somehow, in a song, a family survived by making something out of nothing. When the winter nights were long, but come what may, they found a way, somewhere in a song, somewhere in a song. And when they finally laid their heads, they made a ballad for a bed, and it held them till the dawn. For with notes and words alone, they made a heartbeat for a home, and it goes on and on and on. By making something out of nothing. When the winter nights were